Alright, hey there. Chapter 10, The Worlds of Christendom, Contraction, Expansion, and Division. So let's reflect. Remembering and forgetting. Oh, I want a highlighter. There we go. Remembering and forgetting. Continuing and surprising the worlds of Christendom. So let's start with Christendom's legacies. Many of the features of medieval Christendom have extended into the modern era, right? Those features of the modern world can be traced back to the period between 500 and 1300. The crusading, motivated Spanish and Portuguese explorers, merchants, their freedom and eagerness to borrow technologies helped lead to capitalism and industrialization. Endemic military conflict found terrible expression in the 20th century. Ongoing faith and reason controversy. Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic division of Christianity remains. Universities. That concept was a medieval creation, as was the concept of a separation between religious and political authority. Yet, as we know, the end of the story is sometimes it's too easy to write Europe's rise back into history. We can misconstrue Europe as as destined for world power. So is that a misleading history? Knowing the outcome of a story can be a disadvantage for historians. Historical actors do not possess such knowledge, right? Very few in 500 would have predicted that Europe would be the primary center of Christianity, or that Christian communities in Africa and Asia would wither away, or even that Western Europe would overtake Byzantium. No one in 500 thought that was possible. Or Europe's rise to world importance after 1500. So that's an interesting way to look at things. Okay, I love this image. I think this is a great visual source for this chapter. Christ, Pantocrator. What differences do you see in the two sides of Christ's face? Pay attention to the eyebrows, the irises and pupils. You got two sides to his face. This side and this side. So you're like the eyebrows, the pupils, the irises, the hair, the mustache, the cheeks. Yeah, you're seeing it now, aren't you? Notice all the difference in color between the face and the hands. Well, on the right side, as compared to the left of Jesus' face, his hair sweeps down the side of his neck rather than the back. His eyebrow is raised further. His pupil is focused further to the left. His cheek is kind of gaunt. And his mustache swoops more downward. So how does this image portray Jesus as an all-powerful religious leader? Well, Jesus is wearing a dark, supposed to be purple robe, which is a color of royalty. And he has a halo of light over his head. And he's holding the Gospels. And it's almost like he's blessing the viewer, right, with his hand, giving the ominous dominus, right? So how does this depiction of Jesus differ from others that you might have seen? Well, the image differs markedly from the depictions of Jesus as a baby, right? Jesus performing acts recorded in the Gospels and Christ suffering on the cross. Obviously, it's a very different image from any of those. And it differs from, but it is closer to in nature, the depiction of Christ seated in judgment. So that's an interesting thought. And what features of this image suggest Christ's humanity, and which might portray his divinity? The images suggesting Christ's humanity are his depictions in human form, of course. And the two extended fingers on his right hand, symbolizing his dual nature, and the Gospels held in his left hand. That recounts for his time in human form on earth. And his divinity is represented by the halo of light, the two extended fingers, symbolizing, like I said, his nature. The Gospels held in his left hand, which recount his resurrection. And, the differing features of the two sides of his face, that also represents a dual nature. Okay. Visual source 3. Oh, this is an interesting one. The Nativity. So, why do you think Mary is pictured as facing outward towards the viewer rather than focusing on her child? Well, Mary's pose may suggest that she is offering her maternal assistance to the viewers rather than focusing exclusively on her own child. Such a reading would represent her role as an important, sympathetic intercessor for the faithful of the Christian tradition, the mother of all mothers. And her posture may also suggest a contemplative attitude, right? Perhaps reflecting on Mary, keeping things in her heart. And notice the 3 rays from heaven, symbolizing the Trinity, right? God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's represented by the 3 figures at the top. So what other elements of the biblical story of Jesus' birth can you identify in this picture? Well, there are several. Right? Jesus is behind the Virgin Mary and is swaddled, and the animals are present. Joseph is represented to the lower left, right? With either a shepherd or Satan. Who knows? The angels above the scene are glorifying the Nativity. Right? As is the shepherd on the right. And to the left, the 3 wise men are shown. Right? They've come bearing gifts for baby Jesus. In the lower right hand is the depiction of ablution and the infant Jesus. This story of the washing of Jesus is not found in the Gospels or other written sources, but it is commonly depicted in Russian iconic traditions. Now, facing Joseph is an elderly person, right? Said by some to represent Satan and by others to be a shepherd comforting Jesus or Joseph. But what thinking might lie behind each of these interpretations? Well, if the figure represents Satan, then he could be present as the tempter casting doubt on the virgin birth and seeking to turn Joseph against Mary. But if he represents an elderly shepherd, then he may represent wise counsel for Joseph during a difficult time. It's a new birth. He's a new father. And symbolically shepherding him toward accepting Mary's virgin birth and toward his role as protector and earthly father of Jesus. But it's a very interesting painting, and a lot is left to be interpreted. A lot of subject to interpretation here. Okay, this one's great. The ladder of divine ascent. So, how does this icon portray this spiritual journey? This is busy. Well, the spiritual journey is portrayed as a climb, right, up a ladder. It's surrounded by demons, right? And they're also surrounded by the dangers of sin, including lust and anger, and even pride. Right? But what sources of help are available for the monks on the ladder? Well, you got look at the figure in the upper left hand and lower right hand corners. Right? These are potential sources of help. And the figure is, most likely Jesus up here. And at the top of the ladder. The angels to the left, right? The clerics, right? Who most likely represent the church, probably. Well, what message might beginning monks have taken from this image? Well, the path to spiritual union with God in heaven is fraught with dangers. There's a whole lot a whole lot of obstacles that are going to get in your way. And the path is a long one, needs to be taken step by step, and it's something to be taken seriously, right? Satan and his demons are actively seeking to derail efforts by believers to reach this spiritual union. And at times, Satan and his demons succeed, and some who begin this quest for spiritual union end up damned instead. And the path to spiritual union with God is undertaken individually, but there is support of the angels, the church, and God himself. But it's a great image and a great visual representation. And that is the conclusion of Chapter 10, The Worlds of Christendom, Contraction, Expansion, and Division. All right, I'll see you guys for Chapter 11.